What if I told you that some of the most stunning visuals in gaming right now are sitting in your backlog, gathering digital dust, labeled as outdated? I know, sounds crazy. But I just put 20 older PlayStation games head-to-head with 2025's finest, and the results are honestly embarrassing for the new games. We're talking about titles from 2013 to 2015 that are making current-gen releases look amateur, and I've got the proof. So if you've ever wondered whether that old game in your library is worth revisiting, or if you're tired of being disappointed by overhyped new releases, stick around. These 20 games are about to change how you think about graphics forever. The Order 1886. Tell me how a 2015 game still looks like a prestige TV show that hired a cinematographer with an Oscar. This thing is unabashedly filmic. Like, you can pause on any frame and it screams pre-rendered. The lighting rolls off skin with this soft, elegant fall-off. You see pores, beard stubble, the slightest sheen on a lower lip, and it never tips into plastic. Materials are ridiculous. Leather creases, wool catches light, polished brass reflects the world with that warm, old-world glow. And the volumetrics? London's fog isn't a backdrop, it's a character. Lamps punch through haze, shafts of light feather along cobblestones. Rain diffuses into this atmospheric, almost tactile mist. The camera work does so much heavy lifting too. Tasteful depth of field, gentle handheld sway, cinematic rack focuses. Cutscenes and gameplay blend without that jolt you still feel in modern titles. Even the lab sequences, sparks, arcs of electricity, glass refracting light, have that someone obsessed over this for 6 months energy. People like to dunk on the length, but visually, it's a masterclass in taste and restraint. Every shot composed like a storyboard panel. On PS5, the cleaner presentation and snappy loads just make it easier to appreciate the insane craft. Put it next to half the big budget releases today and it doesn't blink, it just quietly flexes. Uncharted. The Nathan Drake collection is Bluepoint putting a tux on 3 PS3 blockbusters, and then letting them sprint at 60 frames. It's wild how modern they feel when the image is this clean and the motion this fluid. The jungle greens breathe, sunbeams slice through canopies and bounce off wet stone. Drake's leather holster reads like leather, not brown shiny. The remaster pulls out material separation everywhere. Canvas, mud, marble, brass. So environments don't blur into a single texture soup. And those set pieces? The train in the snow hanging off a cliff still bangs. The luxury liner tossed by a storm. Steel groans. Water sheets across the deck. Emergency lights paint the scene with a sickly red that makes you feel the pressure. Nepal at sunset doesn't just glow. The warm light wraps around silhouettes with this painterly rim you see in big-budget cinema. The facial work holds up too. Micro-expressions during banter. Eyes with a little moisture catch that makes characters feel alive. What really embarrasses newer games is how confidently it frames action. Clean compositions, readable silhouettes, strong color design. No trend-chasing filters, just purposeful cinematography letting the art breathe. At 60, the platforming and combat lock into that sweet, crisp rhythm, and suddenly old looks timeless. The Last of Us Remastered is the reason other studios started whispering, we need to up our facial capture. Even now, the faces are disarmingly human. Little twitches in the brow, a tightening at the corner of a mouth, eyes that actually sit in wet, living sockets. The lighting philosophy is pure cinema. Low-key setups, motivated sources, and atmospherics that make spaces feel heavy with air. You walk through spores and the beams from your flashlight break into glittering particles. Dusk turns busted storefronts into moody dioramas. Rain slicks asphalt so every neon sign glows into puddles with just the right smear. Materials are lovingly grungy. Flaking paint, rotting wood, oxidized metal, moss creeping along concrete. Every surface has a story layered into it. At 60 frames, the weight of movement and the snap of aim make the whole world feel sharper, more present. The violence hits like a freight train because you actually see the micro details that sell impact. The audio-visual sync is chef's kiss. Muffled echoes in hallways, subtle camera shake, depth of field that nudges your eye exactly where it should look without screaming effect. And then photo mode threatens your free time because, I'm sorry, the game's a photography simulator disguised as a survival drama. Put this beside some modern releases and the difference isn't raw polygon count. It's taste, restraint, and terrifyingly effective realism. God of War III Remastered is the definition of scale that still smokes modern games. You open fighting a sea god on the back of a mountain-sized titan climbing Olympus and the camera just hangs there calmly framing chaos like it's no big deal. That composure is everything. Marble temples gleam, bronze catches firelight with razor speculars. Lava doesn't look like orange goop. it lights the scene. Kratos' skin shader sells sinew and grit without turning him into wax. At 60, particles erupt by the thousands. Embers, sand, ash, and they don't devolve into visual mush. The boss fights are basically VFX reels. Poseidon's water serpents crash with foamy translucency. Hades' tears look meaty and unnerving. Lightning rips across the screen in layered bolts that actually feel bright. The game knows when to go wide and when to go intimate, sweeping panoramas to ground you on these titanic bodies. Then a sudden push-in as blades connect, sparks and blood mist exploding into the lens. It's clean, legible carnage, and the world building works through materials: weathered stone, cracked mosaics, polished ornaments. So every corridor feels carved, not copy-pasted. Old here translates to unapologetically handcrafted, and that craftsmanship shows. A lot of modern titles are louder. This one is sharper. It aims the spectacle like a surgeon, and the remaster's clarity makes every cut land. Bloodborne proves atmosphere beats raw pixel math 9 nights out of 10. Yharnam is a painting that breathes. Gothic spires stabbing into a cloud-choked sky, lanterns bleeding gold into blue fog, rain polishing cobblestones until they look slick with oil and regret. The art direction is surgical, a limited palette of pewter, soot, and bone, punctured by arterial reds. Materials feel dense and expensive: wet leather coats, tarnished iron, stone that looks like it remembers centuries of cold. Volumetric haze isn't window dressing. It shapes the image, carving silhouettes and hiding threats until your brain fills the void with dread. The lens work, subtle, chromatic fringing, purposeful film grain, restrained depth of field, gives it this antique, cursed photograph vibe. When steel meets beast, sparks spit, blood atomizes into the air, and every swing paints the scene. Animation sells it. Capes snap, beasts lurch with awful weight, your hunter pivots with that lethal elegance that never gets old. People harp on the frame rate, but composition and lighting do so much heavy lifting that your brain just settles into the mood. Step into old Yharnam at dusk and tell me modern games aren't taking notes. The way embers drift, the way smoke curls around collapsing roofs, the way a single torch punctures the darkness like a threat. It's not realism chasing reality, it's stylization chasing truth. And that's why, a decade on, it still humbles prettier but emptier worlds. Infamous Second Son. If you ever wanted a tech demo disguised as a superhero origin story, this is it. Seattle isn't just a backdrop. It's a rain-soaked mirror. Puddles double the city, neon signs smear into wet asphalt, and streetlights carve little halos in the mist. Then Delsin walks in and basically turns the whole place into a VFX playground. Smoke power exhales like a bonfire you can steer, ash drifting, embers spiraling up vents as you dash through. Neon is the real showstopper. Razor-clean beams, light blooming on brick, reflections chasing you down glass high-rises as you catapult across rooftops, leaving luminous graffiti in the sky. Concrete hits different too. Heavy, chalky, with chips and dust that sell every impact. It's all about materials and how light hugs them. Denim reads like denim. Rubber snaps with a subtle sheen. Old brick has that thirsty, matte bite. Sucker Punch's post-processing is pure swagger. Tasteful lens flare. Cinematic motion blur. That creamy depth of field that frames Delsin like a music video. And the city density holds up. Alley clutter, storefronts with legit personality, graffiti and rain streaks layered like a lived-in collage. Flip on photo mode, and you'll lose an evening painting with particle effects. Outdated? Not when it bends light like this. It's a love letter to PBR, and the neon still wins every argument. Killzone Shadowfall is the glossy sci-fi art book you can walk through. The opening skyline of Vecta looks like a render farm flex. Kilometers of glass and steel, reflections skittering across curved architecture, soft shadows that wrap around surfaces instead of slicing them. Materials are the star. Brushed aluminum carries tight specular highlights, matte composites, swallow light, glass layers, reflections, refractions, and grime so convincingly you can practically smell the cleaner. Then it flips to forests, and it's still a clinic. Dappled sunlight waltzing through leaves, fog draped between trees, rivers carrying real color variation instead of a blue smear. The draw distance is absurd. You can track a dropship as a glittering dot and still read the world beneath it. Gorilla's lensing is deliberate. Crisp image clarity, elegant bokeh, restrained film grain that gives the picture bite without noise. Combat leans into readable effects. Muzzle flashes punch, sparks fan out, debris has mass. Interiors hum with holograms and soft emissives that actually light rooms. It feels expensive. And the composition chops, strong silhouettes, confident color blocking, UI that gets out of the way so the art can breathe. People forget this was a launch title because it still looks like a tech demo for Here's how to do PBR in soft lighting without muddying your scene. It's chilly, it's sharp, and it absolutely holds eye contact with modern shooters. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is proof that mood and skyboxes can carry an entire fantasy world on their back. Sunrise over White Orchard paints the fog peach and gold. The wind wakes up the wheat, and suddenly every quest feels like a postcard you accidentally walked into. Velen is a watercolor of mud and mist, swamps where light skims the water like oil, trees leaning like exhausted sentries. Then Skellige slaps you with slate seas, bruised clouds, and cliff faces that drink the storm. It's not chasing sterile realism, it's going for painterly truth. Foliage moves with purpose. Distant haze actually behaves. Mountains blue out as they recede. Villages glow at dusk like embers. Materials tell stories. Geralt's battered leather reads like it's seen decades of rain. Chainmail catches tiny pinpricks of light. Wooden taverns soak up warmth from candles so you feel the difference between outside chill and inside comfort. Interiors aren't afterthoughts. Smoke pools along rafters. Light licks through shutters. Bottles on shelves throw tiny highlights that sell the clutter. And Novigrad, a living diorama, stacked with chimneys puffing, laundry flapping, cobbles slick after a shower. The camera lingers just enough for you to drink it in without turning the game into a slideshow. Even the original 2015 console build, no bells and whistles, nails the intangible. Atmosphere that seeps into your bones. That's why modern, prettier worlds can feel emptier. This one feels inhabited, like the weather has history, and the light has a memory. Metal Gear Solid 5. The Phantom Pain is surgical clarity in open-world form. The Fox engine treats light like a law, not a vibe. Early morning in Afghanistan pours in low and hard, carving razor silhouettes from rock and razor wire. Noon bleaches colors into harsh truth. Twilight turns dust into a gold filter that makes even war look beautiful. Africa hums with humidity. Wet bark, fat clouds, storms rolling through that swallow the horizon. What really humiliates newer games is the cleanliness. 60 frames, crisp temporal stability, edges that don't crawl, and materials that stay believable from 2 inches to 200 meters. Boots kick up fine particulate, muzzle flashes are brief and blinding, and shadows hug geometry instead of smearing. Animation is borderline obsessive. The way Snake adjusts his grip, cloth ripples as you sprint, a guard's flashlight jitter reveals nerves. The camera acts invisible but purposeful. Long takes that swing from macro to micro without stutter, framing that keeps your situational awareness while still feeling cinematic. The UI barely exists. The world communicates. Radio chatter, light cones, dust plumes, all diegetic. Night ops with NVG on become this surgical green X-ray of the base. Turn them off and the moon does the heavy lifting. Speculars winking on metal railings and puddles. It's not just pretty, it's legible. Every pixel is doing a job, which is why sneaking here feels cleaner than in plenty of newer, noisier sandboxes. Assassin's Creed Unity walked so a lot of modern city builders could stare in disbelief. Revolutionary Paris is obscene in the best way. Crowds that don't look copy-pasted, fabrics swishing, flags snapping, candles flickering in windows 5 stories high, and you can step inside those windows. That's the kicker. Interiors everywhere. Walk from a sunlit plaza into a cathedral, and the light changes character. Cool shafts slant through stained glass, dust dances in volumes, shadows soften at distance like real air. Stone has pores. Wood remembers hands. Plaster flakes in layers. Materials aren't textures. They're histories. Notre Dame is a geometry flex. Sure, but it's the little streets that sell it. Overflowing market stalls, gutters reflecting sky after a drizzle, laundry giving you color pops in a sea of limestone. The GI-like bounce is so convincing that a single candle can warm a whole alcove, while the street beyond stays cold blue. Parkour's animation glides over it all, and the camera keeps a tasteful distance so the architecture can perform. Yes, the launch memes eclipsed the artistry, but look now. The color grading is tasteful, the depth of field is painterly, and the crowd density makes some modern games look like closed sets. Climb a rooftop at sunset, watch the city exhale smoke and light, and tell me it isn't one of the most lavish digital cities ever built. The tech wasn't loud, it was precise, and that's why it still dazzles. Alien Isolation is the rare game that nails a specific film era so hard you can smell the 1979 studio lights. This isn't glossy sci-fi, it's lo-fi, oil-stained, hardware you can bruise your knuckles on. Sevastopol Station is built from brushed aluminum, yellowed plastics, clunky CRTs, and green phosphor glows, and the materials sell it down to the scuffed edges and greasy fingerprints. Lights don't just turn on, they hum, flicker, and bleed through volumetric fog, carving out cones that the alien slips in and out of like a nightmare silhouette. The lens feels physical, a little barrel distortion, tasteful film grain, shallow depth of field that snaps your eye to the motion tracker's jittering blip. Every corridor is a study in motivated lighting. Emergency strobes paint red panic, fluorescents buzz a sickly white, and your flamethrower blooms into a hot, brief sun. The sound mix and visuals dance. Steam bursts obscure a vent just as the tracker spikes. A shadow stretches along ribbed walls, and your brain does the math before the camera ever shows you teeth. Even terminals and doors have weight. The UI is diegetic. The props feel borrowed from a prop shop in 1978. It's astonishing how cohesive it all is. This is the kind of visual direction that humbles newer games with bigger pixel budgets, because it knows exactly what it wants to look like, and it commits. You don't play it, you step into a movie that never stopped rolling. Metro Redux is humidity, gunpowder, and dust turned into an art form. The tunnels are a cathedral of grime. Light knifes in through broken grates, catching suspended particulates so thick you could measure time with them. Surfaces have stories baked in. Flaking paint curls off doors, rust blooms in layered oranges, wet concrete drinks in your flashlight and gives it back as a dull sheen. The materials read perfectly from your nose to the far end of the corridor. Cloth wraps on a stock, cracked glass in your mask, puddles that ripple with the bass of a distant train. Then you step outside, and the air changes gears. Snow whirls into whiteouts, wind scrapes across rebar and busted billboards, and the sun drags long, cold shadows across a city that refuses to die. 4A's lighting feels like global illumination even when it isn't. Bulbs warm pockets of space, firelight licks along metal, and muzzle flashes momentarily remap the room. The Redux Pass gives 2033 that last light clarity, crisper materials, steadier frame pacing, more confident post-processing, so both games feel of a piece. Bleak, tactile, and gorgeous. I'm still obsessed with the gas mask details. Condensation blooms when you exhale. Drips streak during a sprint. Grime builds until a wipe smears it into transparency. Metro doesn't shout. It smothers. It makes air visible and light heavy, and that's how it still body checks newer, shinier shooters. Tomb Raider. Definitive Edition is Lara's great big cinema but playable moment. The island is a brutal beauty pageant. Slick rocks glazed by rain, soaked fabric clinging and darkening with believable weight, wood that splinters and blackens under your torch. The Tress FX hair was the headline, sure, but the shock is how the whole material palette snaps into focus. Leather darkens where it's wet, mud cakes with a chalky matte look, and skin moves from dewy to gritty in a single scramble up a cliff. Lighting is the quiet MVP. Torches feather soft light that wraps faces. Cave skylights break through in barely there beams that catch dust like glitter, and storms push color temperature towards steel blue until a fire warms the palette back to life. Cinematography guides your eye without wrestling the controller away. Tight handheld energy in escapes. Tasteful depth of field during quiet beats. A little lens flare on a ridgeline that makes you feel like a DP just let out a satisfied sigh. Even the tiniest prop work holds up. Rope fibers, frayed bandages, chipped paint on a relic. It's a lesson in selling texture and moisture, and it made half the industry go, oh right, materials matter. On PS5, the cleaner output lets all that craft breathe. It's not nostalgia, it's just good filmmaking turned into game design. Crysis Remastered Trilogy is the rude reminder that level of detail isn't just numbers, it's intent. The first game's tropical island still embarrasses newcomers with its sprawling sandbox. Water that rolls with real heft, surf that chews up the shoreline, foliage that bends, breaks, and actually reacts when you tear through it in a truck or with a grenade. Lighting is clear and honest. Midday sun is punishingly white, while dusk pours amber into palm shadows. Then Crysis 2 pivots to a wounded New York, glass and steel catching cool skylight, interiors layered with dust and debris, rain slicking neon into painterly smears. Crysis 3 takes that urban ruin and lets nature repossess it. Cathedral grass that waves in parallaxed sheets, dew-kissed vines over carbon fiber, a bowstring that hums against your ear, while the suit's nano-fabric throws tight specular highlights. The remasters buff the materials and clean the image up on modern hardware. On PS5, you're looking at foliage density and draw distances that many current games still fake with smoke and mirrors. The sandbox design lets the tech sing. Topple a tree, watch shadows crawl in real time, send shockwaves across a river, and see caustics dance under the surface. It's not about can it run Crysis anymore. It's can your favorite 2024 shooter stage a scene with this clarity and scale? Most can't. These three are time capsules, and they still win the beauty pageant. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the Swiss Army knife of game visuals. Every blade sharp, every tool used. Los Santos breathes in layers. Morning marine layer drifts over Del Perro, downtown glass catches a rosy sunrise, and the desert pushes heat shimmer off cracked asphalt like a mirage machine. It's the density that stuns. Power lines webbing the skyline. Alley clutter telling you who lives there. Storefronts that feel curated rather than cloned. Cars aren't just shiny. Paint jobs have depth, metal catches tight speculars. Interiors carry texture you only notice when you jump into first person and see the stitching on a leather dash. At night, the city blooms. Headlights rake across concrete, neon buzzes in puddles after a rare rain, and the horizon becomes a quilt of sodium orange and cool blue. Materials are rock solid, sand, stucco, brushed steel, weathered wood, and the lighting does real work, changing tone from neighborhood to neighborhood. Water is a flex. The Pacific rolls with believable mass, wakes unravel behind boats, and shore foam frays into fingers on the sand. Then there's variety. Mountaintops with crisp air and long shadows, grimy storm drains, polished office lobbies, dive bars fogged with cigarette haze. The camera knows when to get out of the way and when to frame a perfect postcard. The world never feels like a set, more like a city you could get lost in. It's a decade old and still the benchmark for open-world presentation because it balances detail with readability. That's not a tech trick, that's taste. The Vanishing of Ethan Carter is that friend who shows up in jeans and a plain tee and still outdresses everyone. Photogrammetry turns ordinary woods into a museum exhibit. Bark with deep grooves you can practically wedge a fingernail into. Lichen creeping across granite in powdery flecks. Rust that blooms on rails in layered oranges and browns. The lighting is almost shy. Overcast skies that feel soft and truthful. Little shafts breaking through treetops to dust a footpath. Water that's glass one moment and ink the next. It's not, look at me, pretty. It's you've been here before, pretty. The lens choices sell it. Gentle depth of field that nudges your eye toward an abandoned house. A faint bit of chromatic fringing at high contrast edges that makes frames read like photographs. Interiors are time capsules. Peeling wallpaper, sun-faded fabrics, bottles throwing tiny highlights on a windowsill. And the color science is so sane. Greens don't scream. Shadows aren't crushed. Highlights roll off like a real camera. You end up taking screenshots of a rock next to a fern and feeling weirdly proud. Run it on PS5, and the cleaner output just lets the quiet magic breathe. It humiliates modern games by whispering, all you needed was taste and reality. Journey is minimalism with superpowers. It's a desert, a robe, a scarf, and somehow it knocks you flat. The sand is the star, a trillion tiny mirrors catching sun as you carve down dunes, tiny granules piling around your feet, ribbons of wind teasing ripples across the surface. The color palette shifts like a mood ring. Pale morning golds, furnace orange afternoons, cool blue nights where the sky practically sings. Your robe isn't just cloth, it's character. Cloth simulation gives every glide a little soul, and when your scarf lights up, the glow bleeds softly onto your shoulders like a halo. The camera is poetry, wide frames that make you feel small in the best way, then sudden intimate pushes as you surf a hillside and the sun explodes into bloom. The ruins feel sculpted, the glyphs are luminous brushstrokes, and the particles, those little musical notes and sparkles, hang in the air just long enough to tickle the child in you. At 60 frames on PS4's remaster, it's butter. On PS5, the clarity turns every vista into a desktop wallpaper. It's not flexing polygons. It's bending your heart with lighting, color, and motion so pure that a decade later, countless indies are still chasing its vibe. Until Dawn is a slasher movie with a frighteningly good makeup department. Except the makeup is skin shaders and capture rigs. Faces here aren't just close, they're uncomfortably intimate. You see pores, fine peach fuzz catching a flashlight, the wet line on a lower eyelid, and the way a smile falters a millimeter when someone lies. Performance capture does heavy lifting. Every flinch, every side eye lands because the lighting knows how to kiss a cheekbone or drown a hallway in blue-black shadow. Snow is its own character. Flakes swirl in tight cones under lodge lights. Breath fogs into little clouds that waver, and footprints compress powder with this soft, convincing collapse. Interiors are cozy until they aren't. Warm lamp pools, snuffed out by a blown fuse. Fireplaces painting rooms with ember orange, while the windows stay Arctic blue. The camera's got cinematographer swagger, tasteful depth of field, strategic lens flare off a flashlight, and those creeping dolly-ins that scream, "Don't open that door." Even blood looks right. Not cartoon red, but dark, sticky, awful. The whole presentation is so dialed that newer horror games with bigger budgets still struggle to match its face-to-face tension. It's proof that if you nail eyes, light, and silence, you own the room. Dying light makes weather a weapon. Sunrise hits Heron and the whole city exhales. Warm gold sliding across concrete, laundry lines snapping color into alleyways, dust plumes glowing like halos as you leap rooftop to rooftop. The day has this high contrast clarity, hard shadows, sun-baked textures, a sky so bright you can squint through the screen. Then dusk rolls in, and the game flips on its mood engine. Volumetric fog curls through streets, sodium lamps punch orange holes into cool blue air, and reflections smear across puddles with just the right wobble. It feels like there's global illumination on a budget, and it spends every penny perfectly at golden hour. Materials grind with life. Corrugated metal looks razor sharp. Chipped paint tells you which door has been kicked too many times, and wet concrete drinks light and gives it back as a soft sheen. Parkour unlocks the city's cinematography. Slide under a pipe, bounce across a van roof, kick a zombie through a chain-link fence. And the particles, sparks, dust, glass, sell every beat. And at night, UV lamps tear purple wounds into the darkness, and your flashlight's cone becomes a character, cutting volumes like a blade. A 2015 game shouldn't feel this modern, but when the sun hits those rooftops, it bodies half the open world's release since. Middle-earth. Shadow of Mordor is clarity in a world that shouldn't have any. Mordor's palette is ash, iron, and sickly grass. And somehow it's gorgeous. PBR materials make everything read from a mile away. Tooled leather on a bracer, hammered imperfections in Uruk armor, wet stone that slides from matte to glossy as rain rolls in. The atmosphere is a living filter. Heat haze wriggles off forges. Embers drift like malicious fireflies, and fog pools in low ground so silhouettes pop hard against it. Combat is a fireworks show of restrained effects. Sparks fan off parries, blood mists without turning into garish spray, motion blur kisses blade arcs to make every swing feel authored. The world's composition is smart. Jutting rocks frame skirmishes, fortress lights guide your eye, and big sky gradients at dusk wrap the whole scene in drama. The Nemesis system gives it personality, sure, but the visuals give it bite. Close-ups on snarling captains show cracked lips, broken teeth, and eyes with that glassy wetness that sells hate. It's clean, legible, and cinematic without burying you in post-processing. Plenty of modern games add more. More bloom, more particles, more noise. Shadow of Mordor adds just enough and then lets the art speak, which is why it still looks like it could have launched yesterday. And there it is. The plot twist I didn't see coming. The further back we went, the more my screenshots started looking like film stills. Turns out, taste ages better than teraflops. Which one made you hit pause and just stare? The Order's fog? Unity's cathedrals? Or did Bloodborne make you consider framing your TV? Do me a favor. Drop your photo mode crimes in the comments. Tell me which game you're reinstalling tonight and which scene deserves a poster. I'll be down there picking favorites and probably arguing with myself about lighting again. If this reminded you that your PS5 is secretly a museum, tap like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next rabbit hole. I'm thinking tiny indie art pieces versus mega budget sequels. Winner gets your free time. Deal? Thanks for hanging out with me. Now go make your backlog nervous. And if your controller dies mid-sunset, that's on me. See you in the next one.